In the last episode, we talked about some upgrades that we can apply to single item crafters. So in this one, I want to do the same thing, but for single slot crafters. How we can upgrade the speed, the storage, and make it overflow protected. Single item and single slot crafters are very similar, but one turns bones into meal or flowers into dye, things that use a single slot. Whereas the one item crafter is like for turning iron into plates or bars or blocks. The mechanics behind both are quite similar, but there are some unique aspects that are manifested in the difference between using a single slot versus multiple slots. An example of some of these aspects is turning bones into bone meal creates more items faster than turning bone meal into bone blocks. So we need to handle a few things differently. At the end of the video, we're going to build this quad speed converter. Functioning at ×4 hopper speed makes this one of the fastest ways to convert items, and it's overflow protected, so nothing will ever go wrong. But before that, we're going to go over all of the basic versions first, so that we have a better understanding of how these work. At the bare minimum, we're going to have a comparator looking at the crafter to see how many items are inside. Then we're going to have dust looping back around to the crafter that will trigger it to craft. But we also need to limit when the comparator can activate by having a signal strength of 9 pointed into the side, which just so happens to be a crafter that has all 9 slots locked, pointed into the side of the original comparator. And this is the exact same design as a single item crafter. So this would work regardless of what slots were locked or what recipe you were crafting. We can also condense this side part by replacing it with a dust pointed into the side of the original comparator, and then flipping the locked crafter and its comparator over to the side. And this doesn't have to be a crafter. It's just a really easy way to reach a signal strength of 9 just by locking all 9 slots inside of a crafter. But that comparator will carry the strength of 9 into that dust. So the same strength is being compared to the original comparator. But one problem with using this design for single slot crafting is if you ever end up with more than one item in that slot, it will break. So like from a lag spike or unloading part of it because of chunk borders, or if you're trying to load it at double hopper speed, all of these things would break this. So it's not really an ideal configuration for single slot crafters, but we can make it safe by turning it into a clock. Rather than a signal activation, we can use a clock activation. This repeater will turn off this comparator that's reading the crafter just infinitely. It creates a clock. No matter how many items end up in the crafter, it will just infinitely activate because of the clock. So this would allow us to load the crafter faster if we wanted to, at double hopper speed, having 2 hoppers pointed into the crafter. But if your clock has a repeater in it, like this clock right here is using a repeater, that only works at single hopper speed. So if you're loading the crafter with 2 hoppers, the crafter is going to build up more items until it's full. So even if you increase the rate at which items enter the crafter, it's not actually crafting any faster than if there was just a single hopper pointed into it, because we're using a repeater clock. So instead, we can use a comparator clock by adding a second comparator that is on subtraction mode. This is the fastest clock that you can build, and it happens to coincide with double hopper speed. So this clock activates at the same rate as 2 hoppers pushing items. So if you have 2 hoppers pushing items into the crafter, this is as fast as it gets. This is the fastest that you can activate a single crafter. So even if we triple load it with 3 hoppers pointed into the crafter, we can't make it any faster, because you can't make a faster clock than this. So instead, we can just use multiple crafters If we want to craft faster than double hopper speed, well, we can just stick more crafters on there and have each one craft at double hopper speed. So just remember that not only for crafters, but for anything, if your clock has a repeater in it, that's single hopper speed. But if your clock is repeaterless with a torch clock or a comparator clock, that is double hopper speed. One problem with this specific design is we're only looking at one of the two crafters. So if we load items unevenly, the other crafter could build up a stock that it can't craft because nothing's looking at it to tell it to craft. We can also use torch clocks. They are just as fast, the same speed as a repeaterless comparator clock. They're just a little more buggy. But mainly, we want to have a comparator looking at each crafter that we're using, that both will trigger the machine or the clock to on. So in this example, both crafters are being looked at by comparators that are sharing the same dust output. That dust will toggle that torch, and when that torch turns off, it will turn on the torch clock. So then we just need to run a signal from the torch clock to the crafters. No matter which crafter has items, it will activate the same dust line, which will just turn on the clock. Using burned out torches as a clock is kind of unstable and buggy, so I always prefer using repeaterless comparator clocks instead of burned out torches. So this is what we're going to use at the end of the video for the quad speed design. But it's always good to have more options. One issue with crafting items really fast is that if your output fills up, the crafters will just start pooping their items on the ground because they don't know when to stop. And since we're using two crafters being loaded at double hopper speed each, that's going to happen pretty fast. So we have a few different options to prevent the overflow. We can use Overflow Protection with a comparator looking at the output to turn the machine off when it's full. Or we can try to increase the speed of our output, how fast it unloads the items. But this comes down to what it is you're converting. Like bones turning into meal, one bone turns into 3 meal. And we're crafting 2 bones per crafter per hopper tick. That means that every time a hopper pushes items, we're getting 12 bone meal by using 2 double-loaded crafters. That means that we would need 12 hoppers on the output to keep up with the rates. Whereas if we turn cornflowers into blue dye, well, that's 1 for 1. So even though we're crafting 4 flowers per hopper tick, we're only getting out 4 dye. So we would need 4 hoppers pulling from the output to keep up with those rates. And we can do that just by having a chest on each of the 2 crafters with 2 hoppers under each chest. So we have 4 hoppers pulling out of the output equaling 4 hopper speed. So a simple formula for calculating how many hoppers your output needs to have is take 4, the rate that we're loading the items into, and multiply 4 by the number that the items are turning into. Like bones are turning into 3 meal. So 4 times 3 is 12. We would need 12 hoppers to keep up with the bone meal production. Which is actually doable with like minecart towers. Each minecart is equal to 4 hoppers. But these tower unloaders could be their own video, so I'm not going to talk about these in this one, just know that they exist. The simplest way to ensure overflow protection is rather than increasing your storage, just add overflow protection. So here we have the repeater clock design that functions at single hopper speed, and it has overflow protection, with this comparator, this dust, and this lever off to the side. What this does is it's comparing a strength of 15 provided from the lever to the chest, which the chest will have a strength of 15 when it is totally full. which we can replicate by adding a lever right there. So when the chest is totally full, that comparator will turn on, which will turn on all of the redstone, preventing it from activating. So as long as the chest is full and that comparator is turned on, none of this will be able to activate, because all of the redstone is locked to on until we turn off that comparator by removing items from the chest until the strength of the chest is lower than the strength of this side input right here. And we could move this. We could put the lever above it. The lever will strongly power the block it's placed on, which will power the dust underneath, providing it a signal of 15, which is equal to a full chest. For the faster design, for the double hopper speed version, we do it in the exact same way. Here we have the repeaterless comparator clock on subtraction mode, powering the crafter at double hopper speed, and then we have the comparator reading the output, comparing it to a strength of 15 provided from the lever. So once the chest is totally full, that comparator will turn on and lock all the redstone. Regardless of the design, the overflow protection is the same. We just have a comparator looking at the topmost output chest, comparing that to the strength of a lever. So when that chest is totally full, the comparator will turn on and lock the clock to off by keeping dust on regardless of how many items are in the crafters. One issue you may have noticed with having two crafters is that we have to load items into two different chests. Even if we try to merge these like you see here, each of the middle chests would only be loaded at single hopper speed. So they wouldn't be able to load the crafters at double hopper speed, because one hopper going in equals one hopper going out. One easy way that we can consolidate the inputs down into one is by using a hopper minecart. Hopper carts function at the same rate as 4 individual hoppers. So this is a single input quad speed converter with overflow protection. And we're going to build it right now. I designated this build area to allow for one extra chest of output storage. So you'll have one chest underneath the top one. But you could keep adding chests going down if you want to. And you would just raise the build area up for each chest that you add. Either way, the right side of the build area is going to be dug down 1. And the total volume is 6 by 6. The frontmost storage is only going to be loaded at double hopper speed. So depending on what you're converting, there will be a bottleneck there. But we will have overflow protection attached to the topmost chest. We need targets diagonally behind where that chest is going to be, with crafters on top facing forward, and that have all but one slot locked, like so. Then we're going to place the chest right up against their face for them to spit into, with hoppers pointed into the back, and then 4 hoppers pointed down into the crafters and the hoppers. Then 3 fences on top of these hoppers, and on the open one, we're going to place a rail. It doesn't matter which direction this rail is facing. We're going to place a minecart on top of it, give it a nudge in whichever direction that it goes, break out the rail, and then shove it into the corner of those fence posts. Then a double chest aligned with the frontmost hoppers and the crafters. And this chest could be an item stream or anything. It doesn't have to be a chest, just something for the minecart to pull out of. For the overflow protection, we're going to place a block next to the topmost chest with a comparator looking at that chest, going into a solid block, and then a solid block 1 block below that with dust on top. Then a comparator looking at the block with dust on top. Now we want to have dust next to that comparator that is being powered by a lever. And if you added more front chests going down, just make sure that lever isn't next to a hopper or anything. So if we need to, we can place that lever on the bottom of the block that has dust on top. Just that lever needs to power that dust without activating any other redstone in the machine. So as the chest gets full, that comparator will turn on. Then back here, we're going to place a block diagonally behind that target with 4 dust in this pattern and a comparator facing off to the side on subtraction mode. Make sure it's on subtraction mode, that little light is turned on. Then 2 solid blocks with a torch on top of the second one to power the clock. So it should start clocking and freaking out. But then place a dust, a couple of blocks, and a torch on the side to power that dust to turn off the clock. Then we want 3 dust going from that one over to this comparator. That's how that comparator will turn off the machine. When that comparator is on, it will function the same as that torch right there. Both of those will turn off the torch on the clock. But then place 3 blocks starting next to the target, then 2 blocks next to this other target, so that we can place comparators that are looking at each of the crafters. Then a comparator pointed into the side of that one, looking at a crafter that has all 9 slots locked. Or if you want to use a different container, it just needs to have a strength of 9. But then we're going to do the same thing on this side. A comparator looking at the front crafter, a comparator looking at a back crafter with all 9 slots locked. And then we can break out the block underneath this crafter if we want to. Now we're going to place a block coming out of the comparators that are looking at the crafters, and then diagonally down from that, going all the way to the back. So a solid block coming out of the comparator, looping back and all the way around, like so. Then just place dust on these blocks that we just placed, going from the front all the way around the back, like so. So the comparator looking at the crafter will power that dust through that block. And that's it. The quad speed overflow protected converter is now complete. So we can load in items on this top chest, and the rate that the items are loaded into the crafter is the rate that they are crafting. This is quad hopper speed. So it's super crazy fast. And if you're using it for something like bones that multiply the number of items that it turns into, it will fill up fairly quickly. But remember that this bottom storage is only unloading at double hopper speed. So depending on what item you're converting, it's not gonna unload that topmost chest very fast. But it helps. And this is overflow protected, so it will automatically turn off when this top chest is totally full. And quad hopper speed will move a stack of items in 6.3 seconds, or thereabouts. So this will convert a stack of bones into 3 stacks of bone meal in 6 seconds. 6 seconds per stack. Even if you're not planning to auto-craft tons of crazy stuff, the speed of the clocks versus hopper speed is a really good thing to know and to keep in mind. Like if you're building a dropper elevator that only has a single hopper loading it, well, you don't need a fast clock. A regular clock that has a repeater in it will keep up with single hopper speed. They are the same rate. Increasing the number of hoppers loading the droppers or increasing the speed of the clock won't actually do anything unless you increase both. And then it's capped at double hopper speed because that's the fastest clock that we can make. But anyway, that's all we got for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. Always remember that you are totally awesome. But above all, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye.